that aside. So when you come home from the fabric store, you'll have two different cuts of fabric. Your smaller cut, whether it's plain or solid, pattern or solid, will be your border, and the larger piece will be the main part of your fabric. We're going to set the main part aside for now. We are going to start working with the border. Now, I do want to show you something. You're going to see from time to time throughout this video, you are going to see that blue rectangle with a different angle. That's just to show you a different angle for the way that I'm doing things. What you're looking at now is the top-down angle, and now I'm bringing in that picture-in-picture. If that helps you to look at it, fine. If it's more confusing, just focus on the main part. So we don't need the picture-in-picture for now. So just to start with, there's some terminology in the directions that you might not know what it means. First of all, the bright, pretty side of the fabric is what we call the right side, and the duller side is what we call the wrong side. We also refer to a selvage edge. The selvage edge is going to be this edge. Let me lay it down, it'll be easier to see. It's the end of it. Sometimes you'll see writing. Some of them will say Joann Fabrics or wherever you got the fabric from, Hobby Lobby, whatever. Sometimes the manufacturer's name is written on the edge. That's what we're calling the selvage edge. When we mark our fabric, we like to put right sides together. So what that means is we're going to fold it this way. And we're going to line up our selvage ends so that they are even. And we're going to smooth that out so that we have the fold. We have the fold right in front of us and the selvage edge further away from us. Let me bring that up a little bit so you can see the fold. There we go. So this is what we're going to start with. So we've got the fold in front and the selvage edge further away. So at the fabric store, they do a good job cutting, but it's not a perfect cut. And we need a cut that is 10.5 inches wide. This is not yet 10.5 inches wide. And we also don't know, these edges look pretty straight, but we don't know that they're perfectly straight. They're probably not. So what we want to do is on this side, we want to start with, if it's in front of you, this is going to be the left-hand side. We want to make sure that that's squared off. And what that means is this edge to the fold is a 90-degree angle. Because the fold we know is completely straight. We want to make sure this edge is completely straight. So the way that we do that is we are going to take our 6-inch by 24-inch quilter's ruler. And we are going to lay it. You could really use any of these horizontal lines to line up with the fold on the bottom. If you don't have enough room ahead of you, I could slide that down that much. And you can see that I can line up any of these horizontal lines, but if it's easier for you to use the end of the ruler, you can. You want to slide it as far to the left as possible, knowing that you have 2 layers of fabric. So you might have to play around with that a little bit. I want you to actually lift up those edges and see that I do see that I have 2 layers of fabric. Then I'm going to take a piece of tailor's chalk. You always want to put some weight on that ruler so it doesn't slide. And you want to mark that edge because this is where we're going to cut, to make sure we have a straight edge to measure from. You want to keep putting weight on that ruler. I'm leaning down with my arm, my left arm on that. I want to mark all the way to the end. All right, so now I'm going to pull my ruler off, and now you can see, I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but I have a nice straight line. That is my cut line. So leaving my fabric flat, we always cut, that's the bottom of the scissors. We always see how that's flat. We always want the bottom of the scissors to stay flat on the table as we're cutting. And you don't want to lift the fabric up when you're cutting. You want to leave it flat. You have to lift it up a little bit to get started. But you're going to notice that I'm cutting slowly, so I'm accurate. I'm just going to cut all the way down in the blue line. So now I have squared up the left side of that fabric. I'm going to pull this back a little bit so you can see the fold. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to measure 10.5 inches from this straight edge. And this is the best ruler to do it. So I'm going to turn it this way. And these rulers, it might be hard to see on camera, but when you're looking at them right in front of you, they have marks all over. So what you want is that tell you how many inches it is. Each square is a square inch. So there's the 10-inch line up from this edge, and then the little dots indicate 10.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up this edge of the ruler with the fold, and there's dots on here. On the ruler, there might be straight lines on our ones at school. I'm doing this at home. So what that is measuring is from the edge of this fabric, because this is at 10.5, to the end of this ruler. That marks 10.5 inches. So again, I'm going to put my weight on it a little bit, press it down, and I'm going to make a chalk mark the width of the ruler. So now I have a line that is almost the whole length of the piece of fabric. That's our cut line, but what I like to do, I'm going to line that ruler up again, short edge along the fold, and then the long edge lined up with the chalk lines I just made. And now we want to just connect those chalk lines. So we have one continuous chalk line. That will be our cutting line. And now we're ready to cut again. You want to take your time with cutting. If you make it. So that is it for the border. This piece of border fabric is now cut to size and ready to sew. But before we do that, we now have to cut the main body fabric to size. So again, we are going to find the fold. We want to find our selvage ends. You can see that's a little bit darker. Basically, the selvage ends are the ends that they do not cut at the fabric store because the way it comes off the bolt. So we're going to lay this out. Now we're going to use the quilter's ruler to square off our side, but then we're going to switch to the yardstick when we measure. Get this out of the way. All right. So once again, I'm going to lay this up. I'm going to lay the short edge of the ruler along the fold, and I'm going to move this as far left as I can. You want to make sure that that stays even and that what I see, I know I can see 2 layers. And we are going to make our chalk mark. Just notice as I move my chalk, I move my hand up the ruler to help weight it down. And I'm coming really close to the edge of my fabric. That's okay, because I know I still have 2 layers underneath there. And now I'm ready to cut that. So now we have our main body fabric squared off. So on this fabric, we need to measure 26 inches over. Our quilter's grid only goes to 24 inches. So that's why we have to switch now to the yardstick. Okay, so we are going to lay the yardstick down along the bottom edge of the fold. And you want to make sure that the end of the ruler is lined up with that edge, and the bottom of the ruler, the yardstick, is lined up with the fold. We're going to take our piece of chalk, we're going to find 26.5, and we're just going to make a hash mark. I'm going to switch back to my grid. I just like to be able to see it. And when I line up the short edge with the fold, and then I'm looking to line up my 3 hash marks. So now I'm going to go ahead and chalk in my other cut line. And move that aside. You can see that cut line pretty clearly. So I'm going to pull this closer to the center, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Now we have the main body of our fabric cut to size and our border cut to size, and it's time to put the two together. Now we're ready to put the 2 pieces together. I'm starting with the border piece, and I'm going to unfold it completely. If your fabric is directional, and what directional means is there's definitely a top and a bottom to the pattern, and I will show you what I mean. I'll fold up my fabric. My fabric is directional, and if I turn it that way, you can see little Christmas trees with gnomes. So this is the top. I want the top of the directional fabric away from me because the way the whole thing is going to come together. Okay, so this is where it is going to be helpful to go ahead and do the picture in picture. So now you're going to see the angle coming in from the side. So I have my border laid out. Now I'm going to take my main body fabric, and with these 2 pieces, remember your selvage edges. You want your selvage edges on the side. So what I'm going to do, and they're going to be approximately the same width, I'm going to take the body of the fabric and line it up on both ends. You see it over here. This end is lined up. Most importantly, you're going to line it up along the top. You're not pinning anything yet. So you can see, and I'll show you that angle. So all the way across the top, we have it all lined up. I'm going to pull this up a little bit. Now I'm going to take the other end of that fabric, and I'm first going to give it a little fold. Only fold it to about maybe 1/3 of the way up. Then what we're going to start to do, and this is where this side angle might help you a little bit more, I'm going to start rolling it. Now you can see both camera angles, I'm rolling it. and it's going to roll. I'm going to start to see my border fabric underneath. That's okay. That's what is supposed to happen. I would say roll it until your roll gets about the length of your thumb from the top edge. Okay, and then stop rolling. You can smooth it out. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take the bottom edge of your border, slide this down. You can slide it closer to you. I'm going to fold it over the top of that roll. We're going to call it the burrito roll. We're going to fold it over the top of that little burrito. So now we're going to meet those edges once again. So now what you should have, once you get all that lined up, you should have 3 layers of fabric with the edges all together. And you might have to play around with this a little bit to make sure that they really are all lined up. I know this probably isn't making any sense to you right now, but after you sew your first seam and we pull the burrito roll out, it's almost like a magic trick. You'd be like, what? All right, just triple checking that all 3 edges are at the top and now I'm going to put some pins in. Now when you pin your fabric, you're going to dig down. Don't put it right close to the edge. You want to bring it down a little bit. You want to dig down till you feel it scrape the table, and you need to pop that other end up like that. You need to see both ends of the pin. Sometimes I see students put pins in and they just stick one side in. That doesn't do it. That pin can fall out and you'll probably end up stabbing yourself with the pin. So we are going to pin every, oh, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, about every 6 inches, I would say. This is just okay. So you may want to flip that over to make sure you see the pins on the bottom. This is all one little, if you look at the end, looks like a little burrito rolled up in there. That's what you want, because then. So now I'm going to show you how to mark your 1/2 inch seam allowance using the 6 by 24 inch grid ruler. I rotated my piece around so that I have the 3 raw edges right in front of me and the fold away from me. That way when I place this grid ruler on the edge, it's closer to me, so I have better control. I'm showing you picture in picture again, so whichever angle makes sense to you. You can see that my pins are far enough away. Remember, when we use the grid ruler to mark a 1/2 inch seam allowance, you can see my ring light too much. We had talked about how the, trying to find, there we go. So you can see each square is 1 square inch, and then you can see incremental lines. So there's my 1/2 inch line, the one my finger is pointing at right there. So that's the one that I want to line up on the edge of the fabric. And I'm going to have to slide it down a few times. So if I have that lined up, the edge of my ruler is going to be my 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm using a marking pen. We use chalk in class, but it all works the same way. You want to make sure you put enough pressure on that ruler so it doesn't move. You want to mark it dark enough that you can see. So I'm just going to keep sliding this down. I'm going to make sure all my edges are lined up. That's why we pin it first, so that when you're marking it, you know as soon as you're done marking it, you're ready to sew. Okay, so now I'm going to move this So now you can see we have a line that we're going to sew on. So more than likely you're going to start at this end so that when you put it under your presser foot, this edge is on the inside of the machine and the bigger piece of the fabric is off to your left. And then you're just going to sew all along that line. And go slowly enough. Even though you've pinned, you want to make sure those 3 raw edges are staying even. Okay, now we're finished sewing that long seam. Now we're going to pull our pins. All right, this is where we pull the burrito out. I forgot to clip my threads on this end. All right, so remember that burrito that's in the middle? This is the really cool part. So now what you're going to do, and it doesn't matter which end you start, you're just going to start pulling that out. So while you're pulling that out, you can also peel back this outer layer. So now what you have is it all straightened out. You have your border sewn at the top with no seam lines. The seams are all inside of there now. And now you can unroll the main part. Okay, so basically what is left to do after this is folding it over and pinning again. So now what we're going to do, when you have a solid color fabric, it's hard to tell what the right side and the wrong side is. This is a little bit shinier, so that's my right side. If you can't tell, like if you're looking at it and you really can't tell, then it really doesn't matter, right? So now we are going to fold this over. I think you can see now how it's all going to come together. And this is how it's going to get sewn. But before you sew it, we're going to iron this. We're going to press this out so that this border is nice and flat. We don't want it to be folded over like that and overlapping. And I'll show you more at the ironing board. Okay, so our iron is on, and the goal here is we want a good crisp edge at that top fold, and we want to make sure that the border isn't flopping over on the main body part. We want it to look nice and neat. So what I do is I smooth it out like that. I actually pull, so I'm getting the back side. Actually like kind of pulling these two pieces apart so there's no fold there. And you should have water in the iron. You should be using steam. That'll make the job a lot easier. You don't have to go back and forth like that. If the iron has you can hit it with steam if you want. Take your time. See how I keep kind of, can't see. Let me pull this over so you can see it in the camera angle. As I'm working my way down, I keep pulling this top edge away from here to make sure it's not flopping over as I'm ironing. Doing that all the way down. I do it this way, and you can see. It doesn't matter which way you lay it on the board, personal preference, but I think camera angle wise you can see this better. So I'm pulling this apart. So now you can see what we have is we have a nice crisp edge on the folded edge, and this is not folded up at all, or folded over. Now, if you want, it's not necessary. If you have a lot of wrinkles, see how where that was rolled up, it kind of took some wrinkles on. If you want to iron that out, you can. You don't have to. And if there are students waiting to use the iron that haven't ironed their border, I'm going to ask you to let them do their border first. This is not necessary to do this, but if nobody else is waiting for the iron and you want to iron that out, go ahead and do it. So now what we have is our border sewn to our main fabric. These are our right sides. Now, like I said before, if your main body is a solid color and it's really hard for you to figure out which is the right side, it does not matter. But if you have a fabric like this for your main body, you want to definitely get right sides together. So I'm folding this now, and I want to match up the very top edge of the border and smooth that out. I also want to make sure that this edge is matched up. Now what you might notice when you're looking at this is on mine, might be hard to see, this side is a little bit wider. We can fix that. So I'm going to take my grid ruler, and what I never want to do is take my scissors and cut along the edge of the fabric, because you might slip and cut into that. So what you want to do is take your grid ruler, lay it on top just a little bit over the edge of that top layer, and we are going to chalk a cut line. I'm going to slide that down. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this way, and I'm going to peel that back because I don't want to be cutting right next to the fabric that I do need. I'm going to start and just cut along that blue line. Okay, so I'm going to spin this back around. I want to line up those edges again. It's really important that this top edge is even. I might even suggest that you stick a couple pins in there just to make sure that stays in place. That's the part that's going to show the most. It might be hard to get that pin through because now you're going through 4 layers of fabric. Okay, so what we need to do now is sew along this side and sew along the bottom. So we want to mark a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we're going to stick some pins in. Now, to mark our 1/2 inch seam allowance. Remember, this is a square inch, and the lines in between, so there's my 1/2 inch. So I'm going to line that 1/2 inch mark along the ruler along with the edge of that fabric. You can see that on camera. Drag it down a little. Okay, and I'm going to chalk a line, and that is actually going to be my sewing line this time. It's not going to be my cutting line. That's really important to remember. And if you have to remind yourself, maybe write sew in chalk. It'll all wash out. So now I'm going to mark this side. Bring it up a little bit. So now we have sewn the two sides together, pivoted the corner, and we have this raw edge. Now a lot of times when we're sewing, we will press those seams open, but in this case we're not. What we want to do is we want to give a nice finished edge to that. And there's a couple different ways we can do it. Using our machines, we're going to switch to a zigzag stitch. In order to do that, we are going to move the stitch length knob from 2.5 up to 2, and we are going to move the stitch width knob from 0 over to 5. Now it doesn't matter where you start to do your zigzag edge, whether you start up at the border or around the other side. I'm going to start at the border. The way you want to line it up is the edge of the fabric, and I know my edge is a little fuzzy right here. You want to line that up with this inside edge of the presser foot. Now I'm not going to pivot the corner using the zigzag stitch because it doesn't really work, so I'm going to sew off the end and then turn the piece and continue that way. So you can see that zigzag stitch just gives us a nice finished edge, and it'll prevent those raw edges from fraying. Okay, so now we have finished sewing. Time for the big reveal. Trim my threads. Grab the corner, pull it out, and you really want to go ahead and use your finger. Don't use anything sharp, and poke those corners out. Fold it over so you can see it, and there is your finished pillowcase.